Welcome to a Milk Market Tidbit for the May Cold Storage Report that the USDA released on Thursday afternoon. This is Dr. Lawrence Jones, and I'm recording this on Friday, June the 26th. And the Cold Storage Report is always our second report of the month after the Milk Production Report. And then eventually we're going to get the Dairy Products Report that ties everything together. We'll start kind of with the revisions. So for butter, there were no basic revisions. But for cheese, they actually lowered the cold storage by about 7 million pounds. So that's always an interesting question, because what that is going to tell us, if nothing else changes, is that demand for cheese in April was probably better than we thought it was. So now if we look at the actual numbers for cheese, it came in an increase of 12.3 million pounds. That was much, much higher than I had it as a typical and a little bit lower than what StoneX had. And part of what this is telling me now is if disappearance was the same as April, that should have been that very negative number. So this is saying that the disappearance in May is probably a bit weak. Here's a graph of the cheese stocks. So we've been on an upward trend, but we kind of came down now and starting at about 2021. And we've kept these pretty well flat on a seasonal basis. Now we look at how it's changed over time for the last 5 years. It's about 13 million pounds, and so we're not far off of a typical change in cold storage. But there have been times during the pandemic where it was quite low, and also in 2024. American stocks includes the cheddar, so that's what we're probably most interested in. And the question is, should we have been putting cheese into cold storage as the way that this came up, that 12 million pounds? And we look back around the middle of May and say, if we put cheese in here, what's it going to look like in 4 months? So 1, 2, 3, 4, about $1.80, let's call it. Now that's assuming that those prices hold, which again, they have not. But anyway, it would suggest that you could have put it in cold storage and maybe sold the futures at that point and be guaranteed a profit. Other stocks have been on a long-term trend up, but again, these have been more or less flat, starting back here in 2021. So there've been no major increase in cold storage basically since the pandemic. Now, Swiss stocks are a very small proportion of total cheese, and it's coming up a little bit, but again, probably more reminiscent of the long-term trend than an actual uptrend. Now, when we look at butter, this came in quite a bit higher than we had as a typical and a little bit higher than what StoneX had. So surprised at how much butter went into cold storage, and what that is suggesting again that the demand in May is probably a little bit weak. So here's our butter stocks long-term trend. We really started coming down in 2025 and very much on a downward trend. But this time of year come up fairly significantly, so that part is not really unknown. So the milk production report was on Monday. There was a milk market tidbit for that. National Dairy Sales Report, and this is the cold storage report that's going to finish up this week. The next milk market tidbit will be the classic components that are released on July 1st.